perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello again. I'm really happy that you all are watching our show. I'm Harry Greenberger. I've been the host of this show for a lot of years. I have as my guest today a young man who has accomplished a great deal in his years, and I became aware of him because of his activities at the University of New Orleans, which I am very much interested in, and his name is Isaac Meisenheimer. Isaac, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I do want to know I want you to tell our folks about what you did at UNO, but first tell us about what you were doing before you arrived at the University of New Orleans.
Absolutely. I was born here in New Orleans, like a lot of people down here are, and I grew up here, and was lucky enough after going to college the first time to start working in the film industry. I had about a decade-long career doing writing and directing. I started off as a production assistant, kind of worked my way through the chain all the way up to the top, and even got some deals with scripts at famous production companies around the world and stuff. But through doing that, I always had this background love of science and reason, and always a healthy skepticism towards anything considered to be, fantastic in its idea. During my time working in the film industry, though, as much success as I was able to garner for myself, I still felt ultimately unfulfilled at the end of the day, because entertaining other people is noble, but for me, I needed something more. I needed a deeper meaning into the work I was doing. So at 32 years old, I decided that I was going to give up this career that I had worked so hard to attain and sacrifice so much at the same time. Anybody that's worked in the film business knows that the first 10 years is all sacrifice. So I gave it all up and decided that studying the origins of the universe would be a slightly more noble path to take. So I quit and started getting a degree in astrophysics.
Well, that is a major shift of your attention, and I would say a major sacrifice, because I presume you could have gone on to bigger and better things in the film industry. So how did you then wind up at UNO?
Well, unlike going to school for film, going to school for astrophysics does require slightly more math and science classes than you would need to get a film degree. So I knew that in order to understand what I wanted to understand, that I was going to need to probably take some courses that I had never taken before, and get a better understanding of mathematics and a better understanding of physics and stuff like that. So I looked around at the different schools in the area, and of course we have our prestigious universities such as Loyola and Tulane. Loyola was a religious university, so I wasn't very interested in that one. And Tulane, as we all know from one of your previous shows, has Frank Tipler working there, who in the astrophysics community is known as something of a loon, I guess would be the best terminology for it. He's kind of out there.
So you really didn't feel like the Tulane department could offer you what you were looking for?
Exactly.
But when you say the area, your intention was to return to the New Orleans area.
Yes.
I mean, there are schools all over the country where you could have worked in astrophysics, but
Sure.
you wanted to be here, and then did UNO have a decent department?
UNO, unfortunately, has one astrophysicist that teaches there. They don't have an astrophysics department. The physics department itself is quite small. But the people that work there are very dedicated and knowledgeable, and because it's a smaller department, you get a lot more personal time one-on-one with them. And the astrophysicist there, Dr. Greg Sieb, was very very generous with his time and his knowledge.
And your purpose was then to get an advanced degree in astrophysics.
Yes.
And UNO offered enough courses that would lead you in that direction.
UNO offered the courses I needed to get into a graduate program.
A graduate
at any
program
other,
elsewhere?
Elsewhere in astrophysics, yes.
Okay, all right. Now, you wound up at UNO, and the way I came to know you was not because you were in the physics department, because of your involvement with the secular student group at UNO. Tell us how all that came about.
Well, here in the South, we have no shortage of our religious organizations, especially on campuses. There's plenty of religious affiliated student groups. Surprisingly enough, in the city of New Orleans, there wasn't a single secular student group. Not a single one. They have them in Louisiana Tech and at LSU, but in the city of New Orleans, there were no student groups.
I have been concerned about that for years.
Yeah, and it seemed like a problem to me. So I did a little bit of research, and I found out that there was a group that tried to start up formally under a free thought banner, and had a very small success with getting a group started, but it ultimately fell apart. So I began to post up flyers all over the school. Well, I mean, initially I contacted the Secular Student Alliance and said, I want to start a group. Can you send me some materials, things that would help with getting the group going. So they provided, of course, Secular Student Alliance is amazing. They provide you with, all types of flyers and materials and signs and posters and stickers and things that you need to get it going.
I see that they get new groups at universities all around the country, constantly adding new
Absolutely.
groups.
It's not hard to become an affiliate of theirs. It's actually harder to get the groups approved through the schools.
Okay.
So we, unfortunately, and I don't know if this was anybody's fault or if this was just merely by coincidence, which sometimes it can be, but our paperwork that was initially turned in twice seemed to vanish, which is quite amazing considering that we turn things in electronically now.
Okay.
But our paperwork for the Secular Student Alliance seemed to vanish twice from the system. So the third time I had actually made physical copies and went and turned them in to them to show them, yes, we had turned it in several times.
Do you think that was deliberate? Or you don't want to say?
I honestly don't know.
All right.
I've worked in academia just long enough now to know that a lot of times the problems that arise like that aren't deliberate. It's just coincidence. Or
my understanding is that to have a student organization at a university, you have to have a faculty sponsor.
Yeah.
You were able to do that. What department was he in?
Well, we asked a few different people to be our faculty advisor, and several of them considered, several in the physics department or College of Sciences considered representing our group, but ultimately they decided not to. We did find forgive the use of terminology, we did find a savior in Dr. Phillips from the philosophy department.
Okay. Well, of course we know him.
Yes, you guys are familiar with him. But Dr. Phillips came to our rescue and was more than happy to be our advisor. He organizes the Darwin Day events, usually on campus. So he's very helpful in lending his name to us so we could become an official organization.
So you got that organization approved for UNO, and then you were able to sign up a fairly large number of students. Is that right?
Within the first couple weeks, we went from our initial 3 students, me and 2 other people that I knew, to about 18. That blossomed to about 25 within about a month and a half, and we're in the 30s, 40s roughly right about now. So it's slowly, steadily growing.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, what activities did that group participate in?
Well, we've done a few things. We're first and foremost dedicated to service in our community. So we, volunteered for, Save the Lake events, or we'd go clean up the lakefront, or beautification process on campus. Just giving back to our student community that we're a part of by, doing events, anything that we could to help out. But we also would do days in which we would set up tables at the university center outside, and we would allow people to come up and ask us questions. We even did on April 18th. We were part of National Ask an Atheist Day, where we set up a table and even had some NOSHA members come down, and we did a great tabling event. They answered some questions for some very curious students, and hopefully brought a slightly different perspective than the kids that offer free prayers and hugs.
Now, you also managed to bring in an outside speaker of great note, and your group produced a major event at UNO. Tell us about that.
Well, one of the main reasons why I decided to go into astrophysics was a few years back. I've always loved the subject. Always read a lot, done my own research. There was a guy who wrote a book about Richard Feynman, famous physicist named Lawrence Krauss, and he had just recently come out with a new book of his called A Universe from Nothing.
What?
It's called A Universe from Nothing.
From nothing.
And it's a book about why we have something instead of nothing. If the universe was created from nothingness, or if there was, why do we have matter instead of nothingness?
That's a major question.
It's a major unsolved question in physics that we may never truly be able to answer with certainty. But he gave a live lecture at the Richard Dawkins Foundation that was broadcast onto the internet, which I watched, and then read the book as soon as it was released. And the ideas behind it, that there was empty space, that things that we can't see are filled with virtual particles, with this almost soup of the things that make up what we see around us, was so just over my head that I was like, oh well, I really want to find out more about this, but I don't know how to go about it so much, as in, maybe if I could get him in front of me to talk to him for 10 minutes, maybe I could ask the questions that I wanted to ask about this stuff, and maybe that would help me understand. Well, I really wanted to make that happen. At the same time, I also was looking for some way to not only help promote science and rationality and a progressive political view and all that stuff. I also wanted to expose people in this area to not only his brand of humor, but his insights on the larger world around us. So I found out that the student government at UNO has a budget that will give money to student groups if they're interested in doing activities or planning events or something like that. So I immediately went to the College of Sciences to find out who our senator was so that I could approach them and have a bill written. At that time, there were no senators at all in the College of Sciences. So the largest college at the University of New Orleans had no representation whatsoever supporting it. So I joined the student government, which wasn't an easy task. It's very time consuming. But I joined the student government and talked with a few of my other senators, got some more senators to join up from the College of Sciences, and together we wrote a bill, one of the largest bills ever written at UNO, monetarily wise. And we lobbied many of the other senators and went around campus and talked to a lot of people, and eventually we were able to get the event approved.
And you had previously determined what it was going to cost you.
Well, I guess I can say this now because it's all over with, but it was a juggling act of, on one hand, trying to set up an event not knowing exactly how much it was going to cost, and then on the other side, you know, after having gone through that process, then, because the whole time I had been reaching out to Krauss, trying to find out if this was possible, if we could find a way to work within the bounds of what he was used to. And luckily for me, it worked out in the end that we were able to reach an agreement. You know, it would have been horrible if once I would have gone through all that work, or not just me personally, but everybody else that helped with it, after we had gone through all that, if then we had turned to Krauss and he was like, oh, sorry, I just can't do it. Luckily, that wasn't the case. We were able to get him, we brought him into town, and typically at UNO, when we have speaking events, you're lucky if you get about 150 to 200 people. At our barbecues where we give out free crawfish, we usually get, you know, free crawfish for anybody as much as you can eat. You usually get about 300 to 400 people.
Yes.
We did a secular event about the origins of the universe, and we had over 650 people show up.
I understand. I was at your event, and I was duly impressed with your turnout because I hadn't seen anything like that for a secular or scientific event. So, you know, I was duly impressed. I also was appreciative of the fact that you gave the NOSHA people some front row seats because, you know, we think you're the best thing that happened to UNO probably since inception.
Oh,
all right.
thank you.
So you did have this I wouldn't say leader, but this noted person in your field, and I attended that event, and I'll have to say I really didn't understand all of it. I hope that you did.
To an extent, sure.
So that really leads us to a discussion of astrophysics. Tell our people what we're talking about.
What we're talking about. Okay. In a nutshell, I guess the easiest way to say this would be that essentially the origins of the universe started 13.81 billion years ago with a massive expansion of energy. We can't truly call it an explosion because an explosion would require oxygen to combust. So it was basically a massive expansion of energy. Where all of that came from is even more fascinating, and a lot of what Dr. Krauss talks about in his book. When we look at empty space, you know, when we look out in space and we see absolutely nothing there.
You're talking about
space between the
galaxies.
Stars. I'm talking not just between the galaxies. I'm talking between the spaces of nothingness. So, you know, in space we have galaxies which are grouped into giant clusters, you know, and then within those galaxies are bands of gas which are surrounded by stars and all these things. Well, the empty spaces, the big voids, and there's lots of them because space is mostly empty.
Yes.
These big voids which, to us, if we measured it with some type of instrumentation, if we looked at it in any perception that we can have,
you would not find anything.
It would appear to be nothing. Yeah. It would literally appear to be nothing. It would have no physical properties except for the space itself.
I always had the feeling that space was nothingness. That's not the case.
That's not the case at all. The case actually turns out to be that this nothingness is a virtual soup of a cosmic soup of virtual particles.
And how was that determined?
Well, I don't claim to know as much as Dr. Krauss on these subjects, so I'm going to wing it the best that I can. But from what I understand, we found that empty space weighs something. Because what Einstein taught us was that mass and energy are equivalent. So anything that has mass has energy, or energy has mass. So the amazing thing about that is that empty space weighs something. You know, it has a mass, it has an energy value. Now, if you're familiar with, if you've ever seen, you know, in science we use lots of diagrams and charts and stuff like that. If you've ever seen what a wave looks like as it's graphed out, you basically have, you know, your x-axis and your y-axis, and the wave starts, one point comes up, comes down, and comes back up. And you have your peak, and you have your trough, and you have your 2 points on the wave as it goes, just like a wave would crash in the ocean.
All right.
Well, the energy value of negative space is 0. It's got to be right in the middle. But according to the laws of quantum mechanics, because as long as the energy value ends up at 0, it's allowed to fluctuate into the positive and to the it can fluctuate as long as it ends up back in 0. So these virtual particles, or these little tiny things that we'll never be able to see, well, with our current technology, never be able to see, these little tiny particles can pop in and out of existence in such small increments of time that the laws of quantum mechanics allows for this to happen. It allows for these particles to pop in and out of existence. Now, the fluctuation of this provides just enough of an energy level to ultimately, from what I understand, leads to an expansion in a way, almost as if the empty space is doing, these fluctuations in it is doing work on itself, causing the space itself to slowly expand. And you know, one of the big questions we're trying to figure out now is, well, why is there, if in the beginning of our universe we have antimatter and matter, say they're two sides of the wave, say antimatter's the positive, or antimatter's the negative, matter's the positive, you know, why do we have matter that we can see and touch and feel and all that stuff in abundance and not antimatter? Like, why did it go one way and not the other? Or if it was a perfect balance, they would just, you know, if you have antimatter and matter together in equal amounts, they annihilate each other and you get nothingness.
But you're saying there is such a thing as antimatter.
Absolutely.
Now, this description that you were just giving about space and what's there, is this generally accepted by scientists as valid, or is it speculation?
Well, I mean, I guess anything that we do is speculation to a point, because there's no way to travel back in time to the beginning of the universe and empirically say, look, see, there. But I would say that the consensus is yes. The consensus in the physics community is this is what we believe. This is the way in which we understand it.
These are the people who have studied it and know what they're looking at, which I don't.
These are the leaders of their field, yes.
All right. And so they are pretty much, or generally in agreement as to what is out there in what we call space. Is that what you're telling me?
For the most part.
But is this research now concluded, or is there more that has to be done?
Well, there's always more research that's going to have to be done. You know,
what more would they hope to find out?
Well, I mean, there's still so many mysteries and so many things we're trying to discover. We're all familiar with the Hubble Space Telescope and the amazing, awe-inspiring images that it's given us over the years. Well, we're reaching the end of Hubble's life cycle, and soon we won't have Hubble to study these, you know, distant galaxies and these, you know, I mean, the Hubble Extreme Deep Field was, they turned the Hubble Space Telescope on a small patch of sky that would appear empty to anybody else looking at it. Very, very small, you know, width of the tip of your fingernail patch of the sky. And within that, leaving the exposure on for a few days, you know, we discovered that small patch of sky had over 10,000 galaxies in it. And when we turn our cameras in any direction, no matter which direction it is, we see the exact same thing. We see tens of thousands of galaxies everywhere. There's roughly, to the best of our estimations, around 400 billion galaxies within the known universe that we are able to observe.
Isaac, for me, that is mind-boggling.
It is. It's mind-boggling for me too. I can't claim that I actually understand these things as much as I am doing my best to make sense of the data and the observations that we make.
And was all of this incredible stuff created by God?
Well, that definitely is one of the prevailing theories in some circles. The best thing about science is that God doesn't ever come up. The most pleasant thing about working with other scientists or doing research in the field or just talking about these things is never at one point when we're making measurements or observations or discussing theories or any of that stuff do we stop to say, oh, well, we got to remember to put in the constant symbol for God because, he's got that, extra little oomph in this that's making it all work. Because we're completely able to design a universe from the laws of physics that we have now that doesn't require a God in any way.
That something could come from nothing.
Absolutely.
I see. Well, in fact, you had to come to that conclusion, didn't you? That something did come from, something didn't come from something came from nothing.
Sure. Well, I came from nothing. I mean, my parents, sure, they initially had the right ingredients to mix together to create me standing here today, but the most, I guess, common belief in the non-secular community is that of the soul going to heaven after we die and the body being a vessel for the soul, where was my soul before I was born?
Exactly.
I'm assuming it's the same place I go after I die. And
we're almost out of time, and us secular people are really sorry to learn that you're not going to be staying at UNO. Tell us about that.
Well, after the event with Dr. Krauss, we talked a little while, and he strongly encouraged me to apply to the program that he teaches at Arizona State University. The School of Earth and Space Exploration that they have there has a new cosmology initiative that looks very promising, has astrophysicists from all around the world involved with it. I was lucky enough to be, after applying, was offered a quite substantial scholarship to the school, and that's where I'll be going.
And that's the field that you wanted to be totally involved in.
Yes, sir.
And how long does that last, that program?
It'll be about 2.5 years.
Well, Isaac, our time is up.
Oh.
I certainly appreciate you being here, and we'll look for your return to New Orleans. Thank you, folks, for watching our show. We hope we will see you here often.